Husband's been secretly working on a new life in another country with a woman he's been seeing for months, and the part that still makes my stomach flip is not the betrayal itself. It's the sheer administrative elegance of it, the spreadsheets and the notarized copies and the way his signatures were consistent across continents like loyalty in ink. I should tell you who I am because it matters for the punchline. I'm Rhea, I'm 33. And I'm an immigration paralegal, which means I help people move their lives across borders without losing their names in the paperwork. And I've always believed forms are just stories written in boxes. So imagine the strangeness of realizing my husband had been writing a whole parallel story in boxes I didn't know existed, ticking marital status like a dare. It started with an email that wasn't mine but used my name. Not the scary identity theft kind, the mundane you've successfully scheduled your biometrics kind from a consulate I correspond with twice a week for clients. Subject line, confirmation, Rhea. My brain clocked the sender's domain legit. The body of the email said, "Thank you, Rhea, for paying for expedited processing." The appointment was in his city, not mine. My chest did that tiny misfire thing hearts do when the rhythm slips. I scanned the page like I'd scan a client file for a missing signature, and there it was at the bottom, pair name, Rhea and Partners. That's our joint business account, the one we use for boring adult things like car insurance and Christmas stamps. A minute later I found the debit in our app. The exact fee for expedited residence permit processing in a country where the vowels sound like a song and where we once got drunk on a rooftop and said, "One day for a year," because people say that sort of thing to feel outraged by the size of their own longing. Apparently, one day had a date now and it did not include me. You can talk yourself out of anything if you really put your back into it. I told myself maybe he'd booked it for a client of mine, absurd, he can barely book a haircut. I told myself maybe I had scheduled it in my sleep, less absurd but still. Then the DHL man arrived with a package addressed to my husband that should have come to my office, a bundle of document return envelopes and 2 passport photos that were not taken in the place we live. The photos had a blue background and the white shirt he never wears here. He does this thing when he's lying, his shoulder blades inch closer together like they're trying to hide a secret between them. He walked into the kitchen, saw the envelope like a tuxedo at a barbecue, and his shoulder blades said hello before his mouth did. I could play you the scene and let you guess where the confession lands, but the truth is piecemeal and boring at first. Dirty dishes in the sink. A kettle sighing like it knows the tea won't help. My voice doing the level administrative thing it does when someone's visa hinges on whether I ask the question exactly right. Why did the consulate send me a confirmation for your biometrics? He rubbed the back of his neck as if he could iron out an answer. I've been exploring options, he said with a breeziness that belonged in a real estate brochure. Options require photos? I asked. Options require everything, he said and smiled like we were in on a joke. I work in options, I know when one of them is a decision in a dress. Do you know that feeling when suddenly your own home looks like an Airbnb you accidentally booked because the photos were taken in flattering light? I saw the toaster like I'd never seen it, the plant like it belonged to a nicer couple, the way the sunlight landed on the fridge magnets we collected, Lisbon tram, Vancouver capybara, Krakow dragon, and I hated those magnets for being loyal to the version of us that could say we without anyone needing a map. A thing about my job, detail is love. I know where to find the seams in any bureaucratic garment because I've spent a decade turning seams into doors. I opened our shared laptop. He hadn't cleared the browsing history, which is either arrogance or hope. Tabs bloomed like weeds, flats for rent, foreign city, furniture storage, international freight, how to transport a dog overseas, we don't have a dog, best preschool, foreign city, bilingual. My eyes snagged on the preschool. There are no children in our house except the ones we were undecided about and always scheduled for later, like an exciting upgrade would probably never make. I found the folder by accident and by instinct. He called it piano, a word that usually means softly and apparently now means hide your treason under the thing she loves. Our keyboard lives in a corner. He's been teaching himself to play badly for a year, which I find endearing in the same way I find toddlers carrying 2 big backpacks endearing. The folder held scans, a lease memorandum in a neighborhood near a river, a letter from an employer I didn't know he had, "We are delighted to confirm your remote role will transition in-country effective January," an email thread with a woman saved as L with the subject line, "Our place." There were attachments, laughing selfies in a kitchen with tile I had pinned on a mood board 2 years ago and never used, a shot of his hand next to hers with coffee rings around a fairy map like wedding bands made of weather. Her real name later in the signature, Lena. The vowels did sing. Tell me you would have kept scrolling. I did. Not because I wanted to eat the whole carcass of this story in one sitting, but because curiosity is a muscle that misbehaves when you starve it. There were Google Maps lists titled Essentials and Weekends. There was a PayPal transfer to Lena K with a little note, deposit for the Windows smiley face. There was a hidden photos album called No, not for me. For reroute, I learned 2 screens later, where our couch had been measured and turned into non-essential. It felt like finding your name in an obituary for a stranger, familiar letters, wrong story. You would be proud that I did not hurl the laptop or the kettle or the gentle toaster across the room. You would also be bored. I sat down. I wrote because lists are my prayer. Title, Evidence. Under it, 1 Biometrics Confirmation. 2 DHL envelope photos. 3 Lease draft. 4 Preschool search why. 5 Lena. 6 Ticket stubs. 4 Not to any concert we discussed, but to a ferry you take when you've learned a city's mood swings. Then I started the other list, the one that saved me. Title, Needs. Under it, A. Absolute truth in complete sentences. B. Access to everything until the adrenaline in my bones stops believing I live in a thriller. C. A decision I make for myself that isn't just reacting to his decision in progress. D. One person to call who won't explode my life into a group chat. When he came back from a run, which is what he calls leaving when he needs to rehearse, I was still at the table. Is this the part where you call me a monster, he said, which later became funny in that grim way where the setup is grief and the punchline is also grief. Monsters are clumsy, I said. You did this like a person who reads manuals. He sat down in the chair he bought himself after declaring the old one too managerial. I'm not leaving tomorrow, he said, like a person who thinks a date is compassion. I'd prefer you didn't leave at all, I said, and it was not a plea, just a measurement. We did the horrible, necessary thing that night. We put the laptop between us like a couples therapist. He walked me through the tabs and the messages, his voice wobbling between defiance and apology like a bike learning to balance. He'd met her at a conference. They bonded over a workshop on spatial belonging, which is such a perfect phrase for people who enjoy rearranging furniture to avoid rearranging themselves. It became talking, then late-night calls, then plane tickets that fit between the lines of his work trips like contraband. He applied for a residence permit under a category I update clients about, the irony so pure it could be cut into stones. He was going to tell me once it was real, he said, as if reality needs his permission. Whose child, I heard myself ask, surprising both of us. He stared at the tabletop as if it might give him the better answer. Not mine, he said, and my relief made me angrier than my fear. And you want what? I asked. He took a breath like people take a breath when they want to sound noble. I want a life that feels awake. I made a noise that could only be spelled with consonants. You want to be applauded in a different time zone, I said. He nodded, miserable and earnest, and I hated him and loved the way he is bad at pretending. There's a scene people expect, a scene where I throw plates, where I call Lena every name I wouldn't want hurled at my own mistakes. I did not throw plates, I liked the plates. I did not call Lena, I liked my own voice. I told him to sleep elsewhere. You're asking me to uproot everything in a city that tolerates me, I said, so tonight you can uproot yourself to your brother's futon. He went. He texted from the futon, I'm sorry, the kind of apology that is not an ask for forgiveness but an admission of arithmetic. I silenced the phone. I slept like you sleep in a new place, even though the place was my bed, shallow, alert, ready to inventory the doors in the dark. The next day I went to work because you cannot take a day off from forms when people's visas are counting on you. I sat with a client from Lagos who cried because her son had finally cleared security checks for a program she'd worked 2 jobs to afford, and I slid tissues across the table and thought, not for the first time, that paperwork is a language we use to make promises to strangers. I went to lunch alone and ate soup that burned. I googled Lena's last name in a way that was both petty and research and found her public art page with photos of windows and ferry docks and a caption that read, "What if the water is not a border but a mirror?" I stared at that sentence until it became stupid. Then I sent an email to a therapist whose bio said she specializes in the aftermath of selfish dreams, and booked the first slot that didn't make my pride flinch. You want to know if I contacted Lena? Not then. Instead, I texted my best friend Sarah something that read like a crime report. Husband has foreign lease, woman has vowels, I have a list. She came over with dumplings and refusal. She asked me the only good question, do you want to stay if he stays? And I said, yes, if staying is not me sitting very still while he performs bravery. And she said, then write what staying would require like you'd write conditions on a visa, and bless the friend who knows your brain's dialect. So I wrote a visa for my own home. Title, Conditions of Stay. 1. 0 Contact with Lena while we decide if we still have a marriage. If she writes, I see it. If he wants to write, he writes to me. 2. Cancel application, not pause, not reconsider, cancel with receipts. 3. Counseling now and not just couples sessions, his own seat in a room where he cannot charm documents. 4. Apology tour for the parts of me he asked to go dormant so he could feel like a wildfire. Tell my sister, tell his parents, tell our landlord why we might break our lease. Tell the version of himself that likes to believe endings can be staged without blood. 5. No language learning apps in secret like they're sexting. If he's going to learn the words for stay, go in her language, he can learn the words for forgive, try in mine. 6. A line item in our budget named repair, because money is not love but it is logistics, and logistics is how love shows up on Wednesday. He came back 2 days later. He had that death row calm men get when the decision is bigger than their charm. He read the conditions and cried in the shocked, grateful way of a person receiving an instruction manual they didn't deserve. I'll cancel, he said. He took out his phone and emailed the consulate from our kitchen table, CCing my work email, attaching a PDF of a withdrawal letter I drafted for him with language so precise I could taste iron. He forwarded me the automated reply, your application is considered withdrawn. I framed that email with my eyes and hung it in the part of me that keeps score. Did I trust him? No. Trust is not a light switch, it is a dimmer and the bulb is finicky and sometimes you stand there flicking it while the room says, have you considered a window? We sat across from each other in therapy while Dr. Uma asked him questions like she was tuning a string instrument. What did the other country give you? She asked. Permission, he said. Permission to not be the guy who always knows where the jumper cables are. She asked me, what did your job teach you about leaving? And I said, that leaving can be brave and also ridiculous if you do it to be seen by a different taxi driver. He said, I wanted to be the kind of person who says yes to a city, and I said, you are already a yes, you just got bored saying it to me. He flinched at that not because it was cruel but because it was true. 2 weeks into this border patrol for our hearts, Lena wrote to me. Of course she did. People who arrange their lives with syntax don't leave chapters unaddressed. It wasn't a DM or a comment. It was a long email that began "Rear without honey" and ended, "I won't contact him again." In the middle were sentences I didn't expect, no bragging, no poetry. I've been the person left and the person someone left for, she wrote. Both felt like amputations. I am sorry I participated in one without insisting on truth. I have refunded the deposit. There was a screenshot for the windows. The note field read, return. I'm sorry. I didn't reply. Not because I'm better than her or worse, because replies can be a bridge and I didn't want to build architecture where I planned to plant grass. We stumbled. He slipped once, and this is the part you probably want me to skip and I won't. He kept the language app and lied about it for 3 days just to keep his streak, he said, and somewhere in that rationale there is a metaphor about men and gamified commitments. I'll spare you. When I found out, because addicts forget that paralegals live on metadata, I didn't scream. I put the phone on the table and pointed at the cartoon flame that counted his days. If you want a streak, I said, count the number of mornings you tell me what room in your head you woke up in. He deleted it in front of me. He cried again, which is becoming a tic around here. He apologized to the part of me that still believes language is a gift and not a weapon. He wrote on an index card, I will learn your language first, and then said in English the most radical conjugation I've ever heard out of his mouth. I choose. Not I'll try. Not I can't help it. I choose. I put the card by the kettle like a saint's picture. You're waiting for the scene at the airport, aren't you? I'll give you two. The first is early on when I drove there at 5 a.m. by muscle memory to watch a plane leave for her city because I wanted to see if the world would end when it took off. It didn't. A man spilled coffee, a child wore a dinosaur backpack, a woman at gate 27 cried, but probably because of the news on her screen, not because my marriage was a weather system. I stood at the glass and watched a metal tube carry a promise we didn't keep, and then I went downstairs and bought myself a cinnamon roll so sweet it offended me, and I ate it anyway because bitterness already had a room in me and didn't need more furniture. The second airport scene is months later. We went together. Not to chase but to arrive. Not to her country. To my mother's city 3 states away for her surgery. He carried my bag. I let him. We sat in plastic chairs under bad art and he squeezed my knee and it felt like a hand I'd known in 2 languages and was beginning to understand again in a 3rd. I don't want to wrap this with a bow the size of a ferry. The truth is my life is quieter now and better in some places and raw in others. He deleted Lena's number and the country code from his muscle memory. He meets with Uma on Tuesdays and on Thursdays he volunteers with a local resettlement organization because he realized he wanted to be useful in a way that doesn't require being fascinating. I keep helping strangers cross borders with their names intact and I love it more weirdly because I stopped confusing mobility with romance. We have rules that would make our past selves roll their eyes and then understand. Phones in the bowl at 8. No, I'm fine when you're a hand grenade. If you feel a city calling you, you tell me and we put it on the calendar and we go walk inside it together for a week and see if your feet meant something or just wanted different sidewalk. Sometimes I still hate the way words like biometrics and expedite taste. Sometimes I stage a petty exorcism by choosing a country at random and learning how to say no thank you in its language until it feels like a paradox I can live with. Sometimes I imagine an apartment with big windows by a river in the city with the singing vowels and a woman who returns a deposit because she remembered she was a person. Sometimes I imagine a life where nothing ever broke and realize I would have been less honest in it. Last week we sat on our fire escape with cheap wine and a bowl of cherries and he said, I know this is going to sound silly, but I think handing in that withdrawal letter was the first time I felt like I chose something that didn't sparkle, and I said, are you calling me Matt? And he said, I'm calling you the finish that wears the best, and we both laughed because marriage is also roasting the person you've decided to forgive. Our neighbor's kid shouted a word she probably learned from YouTube. A plane went over low. I looked up and didn't flinch. That's the headline I want if we're writing this in boxes. She looked up. She didn't flinch. The magnets are still on our fridge. I added a new one, a cheap souvenir from a museum gift shop that says, in block letters that look like they were designed by a bureaucracy that still believes in posters, please declare all goods. It makes me laugh every morning. It is not a metaphor unless I need it to be. The kettle sings. I press my palms to the countertop and breathe like I'm filling out Section 6, Part A, full name. Rear, I write in the air to no one, to myself. Still me. He comes in with bed hair and 2 mugs and says he dreamed we lived in a city with trams and I say we can visit in October, and he nods literally like a person who has learned that some nouns belong to dates and some belong to daydreams. We do the morning. We go to work. At lunch he texts me a photo of a sandwich and writes, 12:05 I am here. And it is both unromantic and undeniably hot because it is the one thing I needed that forms can't ask for, proof that a person knows where they are and tells you before they leave.